the post-Bryan Colangelo era with the 76ers. Josh Harris and the management group of the Sixers will be hiring their fourth executive front office man since they took over the team. And joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, he writes for 97.3 ESPN.com. He is our Sixers insider. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Mike, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing pretty well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, there's a part of me that's kind of relieved, right? You know, all right, Colangelo, it's finally done. It's finally over with. And honestly, you know, because I was on the air on Thursday when it all went down. Like, it went down right before 12 o'clock. And for me, between reading the Sixers statement, between reading the investigation, between reading Colangelo's statement, all I could think of was, Mike, you know, this should have been done sooner, right? Like, he should have resigned sooner. This all could have been avoided. This drug-out 10-day saga of what-ifs could have been done if he just would have saved the Sixers' face and resigned even a few days sooner.
Absolutely, Josh. I definitely agree with you there. It's unfortunate that it ended up dragging out as long as it did. What I heard basically from, team sources about why it took so long was really, it was over, the investigation was in the hands of the outside firm from New York, and they were, basically being as thorough as possible in a situation like this. The Sixers didn't want to have a possibility where, they could make some sort of move and there could be legal action against them or any sort of ramifications. And I wanted to see what the situation was, whether or not they could, whether they had to fire him and continue to pay out the rest of his contract, or whether it was a situation where he was basically forced to resign, as it turned out to be, so they were not on the hook for his money on the rest of the deal. But it was something that I think became pretty obvious early on once the initial report dropped from the Ringer, that it was a situation that just didn't appear like Bryan Colangelo would be able to recover from, in the sense of he would be compromised in his role with the Sixers moving forward in terms of trust with his players, trust internally, and maybe even trust from outside sources. So it was a move that needed to be made, and it's unfortunate that, it stretched on as long as it did. But I'm with you. I think there's a sense of relief, amongst the organization and amongst the fan base, that at least that's behind them, and now they can move forward into, finding someone that can really, take this team by the reins and build them into a contender.
I actually applauded the Sixers for how they got an independent investigator and how they took their time. In these situations, and even Josh Harris said during the press conference, they want to make the right choice, not the fast choice. Mike, I know it was frustrating for a lot of Sixers fans, and some people in the media were like, why is this taking so long? But to me, look, you just went through the process, right? You went through the tanking, you went through the picks, you waited on Joel Embiid, you waited for Ben Simmons. What is waiting 9 days going to do to make sure you get the right information investigating a guy like Bryan Colangelo?
Yeah, that's pretty much the point there, Josh. It was such an important, critical decision to make there. Well, I think a lot of people felt that they already had it figured out. It was one of those things, you really want to be sure what you're doing there, especially, considering the name and the legacy of the Colangelo family, Jerry's role within the organization, and it's kind of, the respect that he has throughout the NBA and the league. It's just one of those things. I think they didn't want to do it in a hasty manner, just make a rash decision. Wanted to make sure they had all the facts straight. So the way they handled it, obviously, we all would have liked to see it done a little quicker. But as you said, putting it in the hands of an outside investigator so that there was no, internal compromise within the investigation or anything like that. I think they handled it as best they could. And, I think it's unfortunate, obviously, that it happened that way, but I think it's done and behind them soon enough that it shouldn't have, any major lasting impact on the team moving forward, hopefully.
It's a little frustrating, I know, because, they say this saying, Mike, optics is a lot in sports. It's just a lot in life. And now you're going to be getting your fourth general manager in here under the Josh Harris and their ownership's tenure. And realistically, from the whole big picture, whether people are for or against the process, whether people liked or disliked Colangelo, Mike, you and I have had numerous conversations. I'm not personally a fan of Hinkie or Colangelo. So for me, I wasn't, dug in 100% on either guy. But at the end of the day, everything that has happened under this ownership, it's almost kind of frustrating. It's like, this is not the best look for them to be going through all of these executives.
Yeah, it's definitely not, Josh. I think it like you said, it definitely doesn't look great across the league to be, having be in flux constantly at the top of the organization. The GM position is one that, you want to have stability in. And if you look around the league, the top franchises, the Spurs, the Warriors, other than the Cavs, pretty much all the teams that were in serious contention this year had GMs that have been in place for years and have been able to, build relationships within the organization, with the players on the team, and kind of establish something, within the organization. And having, as you said, 4 different general managers during this current ownership group is kind of robbed the team of the ability to do that. Now, obviously, the rebuild and the way Hinkie approached it certainly kind of shook things up in a different manner, but replacing him was one thing, and that was kind of a move that was obviously heavily criticized. And then to have to replace his replacement, I think, is the worst look out of the entire situation. I think ideally, if the Sixers had their way, this situation, they wouldn't have had to, move on from Bryan Colangelo, but there was this, no way you could keep him in the position considering all these things. So it's certainly not ideal, and I think that they really have to nail this next GM, the next selection that they make here. This is going to be a guy that's going to take, basically what Colangelo was supposed to do, take the work that Hinkie put in, the foundation that he has in place, and take that and build it into a contender. I think, Colangelo obviously took one step forward. The team made the playoffs this year, second round. But now whoever comes in next is really going to be expected to build a championship contender with these pieces, a team that, gets to the finals, contends, perennially. So this is a situation where I think the Sixers really need to nail this pick coming up, or, obviously that would be a serious issue moving forward.
I mentioned earlier, Josh Harris said at the press conference, they want to make the right choice, not the fast choice. They hope to have a guy in place by the end of the month. Brett Brown is in charge of basketball operations in the interim. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, what do you think the ownership group is looking for from the next general manager? We know that Bryan Colangelo was more of an old school approach. Sam Hinkie was more of a new school approach. I've argued, Mike, that to me right now, the best thing for this organization is to get a guy in here who understands how to work the cap and how to write contracts, because that's really what the next stage is. Right now, you're going from rebuild to contender. And when you're dealing with contender, being able to write those contracts and being able to work those numbers is key.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I would say the 2 key factors for me would probably be a guy that, is very, obviously, like you said, in tune with the salary cap and the numbers, and a relationship guy in terms of a guy that is respected amongst the players. Obviously, you want a guy that's going to be sitting down with free agents, not only this summer, but, in the next summer, the coming summers. It's going to be talking to players to come to this team, and you want a guy that, obviously not only puts a positive face on the organization, but one that the players can relate to and that they can sort of see a vision with. I think those 2 factors combined is obviously the key, for the Sixers. I don't think, from what I've heard, at least early on in this, in their search here, I don't think there's a specific, like a mold of exactly what they're looking for. I think it's more so that this is a position that a lot of people want, and the Sixers are pretty open in terms of that they're going to listen and talk to a whole lot of people and kind of see, get an idea of different candidates' approaches to how they would handle the team from where they're currently constructed. And as you said, they're going to take their time based off, obviously, what Josh said at the press conference the other day, earlier this week. It doesn't sound like they're in a rush. Luckily, having Brett Brown in place to be a guy that can kind of be the guy that is the stopgap in here and can kind of serve as the GM in the interim. And Brett is being a guy that's very well respected, liked by his own players, and obviously players talk. He is, well liked by the guys in San Antonio and the work he did in that organization. So I think in the meantime, having Brett is a real key for the Sixers in this situation. I don't think there's a whole lot of coaches in the NBA that would be as able to handle the situation as well as I think Brett is, and gives the organization confidence that they can kind of, take a little bit longer. Obviously, they don't want this search to draw out, but I think having Brett in place gives them a little bit of breathing room in terms of, okay, we don't have to rush this search. We can talk to a whole lot of candidates and then make the best choice for our organization.
The word right now, Ms. Mike, is that the top 3 candidates coming out right now who the Sixers are going to reportedly going to talk to are going to be David Griffin, former Cavs GM. You have Mike Zarin, who's been working in the Celtics front office, and then Kiki Vanway, the former executive with the Nuggets. I was kind of hoping, Mike, that we would see a guy, like a George Felton, who's the director of player personnel with the Spurs, or a guy like Larry Harris, who's the Warriors director of player personnel. Harris also a former GM of the Bucks, Milwaukee Bucks. So I was kind of hoping we see those two names, but I think the first three are very interesting names. What are your thoughts on those first initial three?
Yeah, like you said, Josh, I think those are obviously the ones that are, coming up the most. Mike Zarin in Boston has been, really instrumental in, kind of helping Danny Ainge build this, the Celtics team into what it is. He obviously kind of worked up from the bottom under Danny Ainge. He was a candidate for the Sixers job back in 2013 before, Hinkie was hired for the position, and I don't think that interest between the Sixers and Zarin has ever completely faded. So I think he would, certainly make sense there. David Griffin obviously is another one that would probably be considered the Vegas favorite right now, or at least the one that you're hearing get tossed out the most. To me, David Griffin's kind of I don't think I'm quite as sold on him as a lot of other people are. Obviously, the LeBron connection would be the big one, and if David Griffin thought that, and the team thought that he had the ability to come in here this summer and really impact LeBron's decision to potentially join the Sixers, and then he would be the guy that would be kind of overseeing the Sixers with LeBron. He showed that he was capable of doing that in Cleveland, so I think it would be a good fit. But otherwise, his track record is not, 100%. He has some misses in the, the NBA draft. There was obviously the Anthony Bennett pick. There was some other, personnel moves that he made prior to LeBron coming back to Cleveland.
Mike, real quick. Also, does it bother you at all that, for me, it's a little sketchy that Griffin worked in the Suns organization for 17 years, and his boss was Bryan Colangelo. It feels a little too close for comfort for me.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh, and that's something that I think flies under the radar a good bit. There is obviously that overlap. I don't think that it was, I don't think there's necessarily an overlap in terms of what their approach would be, or that they're coming from the same organization, but I do kind of see the, your point there in terms of them being close. I don't necessarily think that Griffin would really be the best pick anyway, to be honest with you. I don't know that his track record is that, impeccable, that I think he should be the heavy favorite as he is right now. So those two guys, I forget, who was the third name?
Kiki Vandeweghe.
Kiki's a guy, obviously, who's been around the league for a long time, did a lot early with Dirk in Dallas, helped his development and helped the Mavericks, and then, his work with the Nuggets. It would be an interesting choice. I think he has a lot of respect. Obviously, he's well known around the league. I'm not sure exactly what his approach to team building in today's NBA would be. I guess that would be something interesting to see. But I think, like I said, I think they'll kick the tires of a lot of those guys. And those three, probably out of those three, I would say Zarin would be my top choice. I think he would probably make the most sense for the team, followed by, I guess, Griffin, and then probably Kiki.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. I like Zarin a lot, especially since we've been learning more and more over the years that he's the guy who's been writing a lot of the contracts and working a lot of the legalese in the Celtics front office, because he has that legal background. So I kind of like that. We see what Howie Roseman has done with the Eagles. I think sometimes a little bit more of a brainy guy running the GM can be a good thing. Let's switch over to Brett Brown real quick. This is a guy who I think comes out from all of this Colangelo mess and everything else. I mean, just looking bright as the sun right now, because you saw him at the press conference. I mean, this guy was composed. He was calm and collected. He has been taking the bullets for this organization for years now. I mean, whether when it was Hinkie, when it was Colangelo, when those guys weren't coming out and talking to the media, who was Mike? It was Brett Brown. And I think that this is something they owed him. They owed him that contract extension, and they owed him that opportunity to say, listen, we want you a little more input from you when it comes to this front office, because let's be realistic, Mike. Brett Brown has done everything and more to help this organization, and he comes from an organization in the Spurs where Greg Popovich is a part of that front office too.
I couldn't agree with you more, Josh. Brett has been, just a beacon of bright light for the Sixers during this entire rebuild, and he's really, very responsible for keeping this team on track through what was, an extremely difficult time. It would have been easy for him to lose that team at any point in time during those 4 years. It would have been easy for the players to tune him out. It would have been easy for him to kind of, give up or feel disenfranchised or disheartened at some point, and he didn't. There's just not a more positive person than Brett Brown in the league, and the culture that the Sixers have right now is so much due to Brett and his positivity and his ability to focus on the future while also, getting the best out of the present. I think, like you said, they almost owed him this. He has to feel great right now, coming through obviously two separate general managers. There was questions about whether he would survive Colangelo's tenure with the team, whether they would want to bring someone in. And, at this point, he is the face of the organization in terms of the front office. And I think, like you said, there's just not a better guy that this could have happened to. And not just saying that, like his attitude has permeated the entire organization. The players will tell you that. The owners will tell you that. I think he's very well liked. And it's something that's a situation for him that a lot of GMs, or a lot of coaches rather, kind of want. And he sort of just backed into, this is a situation where he's going to get to have a lot of say into the GM that the team picks. He's going to get to have a lot of say, or pretty much the final say, into their draft pick this year, into the free agency approach this summer. That's a position that a lot of coaches try to fight to get. If you look at, Stan Van Gundy or, Doc Rivers, guys like that, Brett is kind of backed into this, and he's smart enough to know that he doesn't want it long term. He's doing it for the team in the short term. And it's just another example of him going above and beyond the duties since he's been on this coach. And to judge what he's done based off his record, up to this point would be silly.
All right, so a couple of points here about the Sixers. I appreciate your time on a Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. All right, Mike, as of June 9th, you have your right to change your mind next couple weeks, but as of today, keep the 10th pick or trade the 10th pick?
I think we keep it, Josh. I think they could get some pretty good value at the 10 spot, whether it be, Bridges or another player, Kevin Knox. I think there's good players around that area that could really complement the team going forward. So if I had to pick, I think they keep it.
We know that the Sixers are going to have about $25 million in cap room. Would you rather see them go all in on one free agent or use that cap room to get a plethora of players to build around Simmons and Embiid?
I would like to see him use it. Obviously, if it was all for a guy that I think would really put the team over the top, and that this summer would be, LeBron or Paul George. One of those two guys I think would obviously fit really well on this team. Otherwise, I think, not necessarily tying all that money up, keeping it open for the coming summer and using it, like you said, for a plethora of guys that can contribute and kind of just solidify the team, I think would be probably the better approach.
I was saying earlier in the show, and nothing has changed my mind just yet because obviously we're still waiting for more information to come out because, the LeBron situation is ever evolving, especially with the news coming out the last few days that even LeBron's people don't even know what he's doing yet. He hasn't talked to them about what his plans are this offseason, which to me is just totally different than it was in 2010, right? 2010, it was all we kept hearing was LeBron talking to everybody about, oh, I like the Knicks. Oh, I like the Heat. Oh, I like the Bulls. This year it's just been totally mum for the most part. To me, I think that there's 7 teams that LeBron could consider, and I think that the Sixers have to be considered among, shall I say, the top four choices. What do you think?
I agree, Josh. I actually think exactly 4 teams. I see the Lakers, the Rockets, the Sixers, or the Cavs staying in Cleveland as the 4 most realistic options for LeBron this summer.
Okay, so you don't buy into Jerry West being with the Clippers or what Brian Windhorst is saying that, LeBron misses the structure and the environment of the Miami Heat?
Nah, I don't buy either of those, Josh. Maybe the Spurs would be the 5th organization I would throw in there. Obviously, he has immense respect for Popovich and the system that he's been able to build in San Antonio. The Heat, there's nothing for them to really offer him other than a reunion and, a worse roster than the Cavs have. But I don't see that happening.
And then you don't think Jerry West can talk sweet nothings into his ear with the Clippers?
No, I think if he goes to LA, it'll be with the Lakers. They have enough space to sign him and potentially another max guy. If him and Paul George somehow were in communication over the summer, or him and Boogie Cousins, I could see him going to LA with another max caliber player, but to the Lakers, not the Clippers.
Some rumors out there that Markelle Fultz is working with NBA skills trainer Drew Hanlon. Hanlon has a history of working with Bradley Beal, Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine, and Joel Embiid as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was very happy to hear that, Josh. I think it's a solid sign. Like you said, Drew has a great track record with guys in the league and helping them directly with things that they can, apply to in-game skills. There's a video floating around on Twitter right now that's a mashup of Embiid working with Hanlon in the gym and then doing the exact moves that he worked on with Hanlon in the game. And you can just kind of see how that development crosses over from the practice floor to the game floor. And, with Markelle, he's all the talent's there. I'm sure you've seen some of the dunk videos he's been putting out on social media. It's just a matter of getting the mechanics and the confidence back up, and I think Drew is a great resource to help him do that over the offseason.
The thing with Markelle is in that he's just potential untapped yet because he missed basically the whole last season. The little bit we saw of him is nowhere near 100% physically or mentally with this young man. And, coming out of college, I got criticized for this analogy, but I said, look, to me, when I see Markelle Fultz, I think the ceiling is Dwayne Wade, and worst case scenario, he's Baron Davis. And I don't know about you, but either one of those guys in their prime, it sounds like a pretty nice option for the Sixers right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I don't disagree at all. To me, he's basically still a blank canvas. I'm really not drawing many conclusions at all from his rookie year. There was clearly something going on with the shoulder, both physically and mentally. He was a 19-year-old kid, a lot of pressure. It was obviously not an ideal situation. I don't think he probably would have loved to have a redo on the season if he could. But, from what I've seen from him, both on the practice floor and in the games, there's, like you said, it's a mound of untapped potential and athleticism. And I think that he has the instincts for the game, too. It's not just raw potential. He has a great feel and a knowledge for the game, for his teammates, for, just where to be on the floor and where things are going to happen. And I think I think coming into this year, maybe I'm being optimistic as a fan of the team and someone that covers it, but I think that Markelle is going to be, not only looking to kind of prove a lot of people wrong after, an entire season of people hear people saying that he shouldn't have been the top pick and that he was a bust, but I think that he could really be a key contributor to the Sixers next season, whether or not he starts or if he comes off the bench as just a guy that explodes and brings scoring to that second unit. I think he's due for a bounce back season. I think we're going to see why he was, so highly touted coming out of college.
All right, one more for you. J.J. Redick, Marco Bellinelli, Ersan Ilyasova, all free agents. Do all of them come back, one of them come back, or two of them come back?
I think two of them come back, Josh. I could see J.J. coming back, and I could see Marco coming back. I think Ersan will probably get a little bit higher of an offer on the open market than the Sixers would be comfortable matching. He's pretty he's a pretty good fit in today's NBA for what he can do in terms of stretching the floor, playing a little defense, drawing charges, rebounding on the offensive glass. He has a skill set that is pretty well tailored for today's game. So I think there'll be, no shortage of teams interested for him either as a potential starter in a stretch four role or as a reserve guy like he was with the Sixers who could come in and play, give you 20, 25 minutes of solid, veteran action off the bench. And, I just don't know if the Sixers will have the funds. I think the demand for Marco, although obviously he's an elite shooter, I think the demand might be a little less, and I think he knows that he benefits from playing alongside a guy like Ben Simmons and a guy like Joel who can get him open looks. And JJ, everything that he's said since he's been with the team has been how much he's loved the time here, how much he, enjoys the city and the fans and the team and his teammates, and he's been, nothing but positive about playing for Brett Brown. So I would be, there'll be offers for JJ too, and if it comes down to the money, the Sixers might not be able to match what another team offers him, especially if they're trying to bring in a guy like George or James. But I think that JJ would be willing, if the team is continuing to improve, I think he'd be willing to, take a little bit less, obviously, than what he made this year, or even maybe what he would get on the market from another team to, continue to build here with the Sixers. So I could see him and Marco both coming back for next season.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB on Twitter for all of your Sixers news throughout the year. Mike, appreciate the time, and we'll probably be chatting more around the draft.
Yes, sir, Josh. Always great talking to you.